As mentioned, good views may be hard to come by, at least early in the evening and perhaps throughout the entire evening with the atmospheric haze. Discovered a little phenomena last night. We saw a bubble around Sombrero Galaxy, which to me basically hinted at light being basically reflected off and refracted from atmospheric water. I suspect when we get a chance to look at the Sombrero Galaxy again later on as a check of conditions, that problem will still maintain. This is NGC 4029, Galaxy in Virgo. It's magnitude 13.5, 1.2 by 0.7 arc minutes, 277 million light years distant. It's a spiral with of a class capital BB, which means I'm sure it's got some nice bars in it. We're not likely to see it. I'm seeing a bit of a galaxy right here, but I expected it to turn up in this region of the screen, and there are some fainter galaxies. This may actually be 4029 here, but the scope lined up pretty good. There are probably several galaxies. Every one of these images we'll see tonight will probably have at least a half dozen galaxies in it. And the question then is exactly which one it is, but this one's magnitude 13.5. We haven't achieved sky dark, lots of atmospheric water, so there could be some issues with getting a really good image of any of the 13th plus magnitude galaxies on this evening. But hey, get the scope out, stars are visible, and you want to get a sense of atmospheric conditions and the effects on views. Anyway. Well, our next galaxy is NGC 4030. It's pretty obvious on the screen. Galaxy in Virgo, magnitude 10.6, 4.2 by 3.2 arc minutes, a mere 67 million light years distant. So it's about half the size of Messier 31. So it probably comes in at about 75,000 light years in diameter. It's a spiral of a lowercase bc, which probably means a smaller bar and a smaller core, a less developed galaxy in that regard. And our view is quite obvious. Before I proceed to the next galaxy, I will sync up to the galaxy at my fingertips so it'll be closer to the very center of the screen where we get a higher contrast image. Okay, just as a check of contrast, I've repositioned 4030 to the very center of the field of view. I can see it both on the handheld camera. It's right at the very top of the dark contrast bar. There's an obvious core, and it has a nebulosity heading off to what I would describe as the 10 and 4 o'clock positions. But once again, it's a 10th magnitude galaxy. The next one, however, is going to have far less light. Okay, now we're on to NGC 4032, a galaxy in Coma-Virgo, magnitude 12.3, 1.9 by 1.8 arc minutes. It's an irregular galaxy, 59 million light years distant. You can see that it's like just a faint glow of nebulosity right about here at the tip of my finger. Given the fact I still see a bit of a tint of blue in the sky, it's not too bad of a view. It's a fairly large but diaphanous galaxy with no real centralized core, which is why it's considered irregular. Once again, it's 59 million light years distant, NGC 4032. One thing I've noticed last night is it's actually taking a little longer, by about 25% longer, for the images to form on the screen than I had anticipated. I had calculated the image 6 stacks at 3 seconds, but it turns out that it's closer to 6 stacks at 4 seconds in order to generate an image at 256 flood. This galaxy is 4037. I'm going to look while the image forms. What I did notice last night is most galaxies, you started to get an initial impression of it after about 8 to 10 seconds of image composition after 2 passes of the 256 flood. Let me tell you about, give me a moment here as the image forms on the screen, and then I'll to give you some data on 4037. Frankly, I'm not really seeing it yet, and it should have formed up, but I'm seeing something quite faint right there in the very center of the screen. 4037 is a galaxy in Coma-Virgo, magnitude 11.9, 2.4 by 2.2 arc minutes in size, spiral with a large bar, 46 million light years distant. I do see a distended haze right there. There's no sense of the core. If that is the core, it's pretty faint. So 4037 may either we've got some more atmospheric water. I'm not seeing clouds up there. I'm just seeing a uniform sense of atmospheric water vapor in the sky. If this is 4037, it certainly seems fainter in magnitude 11.9. Okay, what I'm not seeing here, oh, it's beginning to form now, is a galaxy NGC 4040 in Coma-Virgo, magnitude 13.3, rather extended, 1.9 by 1.3 arc minutes. It's an elliptical, 313 million light years distant, so they generally do tend to be mature galaxies with high metallicity and specific relative brightness. I believe the galaxy is located right there at the tip of my finger. It should be visible on the screen. I did discover from last night, pulling together last night's imagery, that things appear on the screen a little better than I expect them to from where I'm sitting here. I am looking kind of, the scope has equatorially flipped to go west, so I'm not in the usual position. It's comfortable enough now from this side, given the fact that the scope's probably tilted at a 50-degree angle, and that's a good angle for me to be able to view the LCD screen from. I'm going to go on now to another galaxy, we can't go to 4041, it's in Ursa Major. Here's another galaxy, very faint. I don't expect to be able to see this one. It's in Coma-Virgo. I will go ahead and turn off the imager right now and flip to it, and we'll see if anything turns up on the screen. Especially under these conditions, I don't expect a 16th magnitude galaxy to turn up. It always astonishes me how deep we can go with things. I am seeing something that looks like a very, very faint nebulosity right about there on the screen. Quite small, as you might expect. And at magnitude 16.6, I'd love to revisit this on a darker night, but you know, all these galaxies in Coma-Virgo and Leo are heading to the west. They're only, eventually I won't be able to see them from the observatory. And probably not in too long anyway, given the fact the sun is really heading north, making the nights very short. Sky dark is not happening until 9:45 right now, and it'll get as late as 10, maybe 10:15 when we get to the summer solstice. So these are going to be gone in no time whatsoever, but there are hints of a galaxy right at this point, 16th magnitude. That's just astonishing. That's 4 magnitudes, maybe fainter than anything I really saw with a 6-inch scope, even under optimal sky conditions when I was working from the eyepiece. Our next study is NGC 4043, another galaxy in Virgo, magnitude 13.6, quite doable, 0.6 by 0.5 arc minutes. It's a spiral of class O, which means it's pretty close to got high metallicity and probably a very high luminosity compared to most spirals. 291 million light years distant. And I can really make out the galaxy right there. It's Not very large, but 0.6 by 0.5 arc minutes. There is some sense of detail to it. So there is a brighter core surrounded by an aura of diminishing nebulosity, and of course it just dissipates into space, but very quickly. Okay, now we're on to another galaxy in Virgo, magnitude 13, NGC 4044, 1.2 by 1.1 arc minutes. It's an elliptical, some 277 million light years distant. I have seen them twice as far away as that at times, especially I believe it was one in Hercules at the time. You can see the core of the galaxy right there at the tip of my finger. The scope is doing a pretty good job of go-to centering right now. I'm very pleased with that. After a while it'll drift. You usually need an off-axis guider in order to prevent that kind of drift, because stepper motors aren't necessarily exactly precise, so they need to be corrected on occasion. Anyway, we are getting a pretty decent view of the core of that galaxy, plus some extended aura of nebulosity around it. Magnitude 13, NGC 4044. Another galaxy in Virgo, NGC 4045. It's also 4046, magnitude 12, a little larger than most, 3.1 by 1.9 arc minutes. It's a class BA lowercase spiral with a ring, 88 million light years distant. Usually when a galaxy has a ring around it, the idea is that a spiral arm is basically wrapped around the galaxy, in my estimation. You can see it right here, the galaxy. Very starry-like core. The funny thing about it, looks like the ring is going off towards the 330 position from where that bright node is on the galaxy. So a little unusual. Be interesting to see an image of it. It's magnitude 12, as I said, 3 by 1.9 arc minutes, 88 million light years distant, NGC 4045. Well, that may be explicable now. NGC 4045 has an A galaxy, an associated galaxy with it. Fainter, magnitude 14.4, smaller, 0.6 by 0.4 arc minutes. It's a spiral of class B and O, which means, I believe it means it has a bar, and it's pretty much a disk-like galaxy with a bar, 218 million light year distant. I don't quite recall how far away 4045 was, but if it's roughly around 215 to 218, and these are actually a pair of galaxies that are pretty close in space. In fact, this may be a galaxy here, the brighter one, and this may be the fainter one there, which is what I thought originally was the actual galaxy. But looking at this particular star now, it does look to be, the luminosity is smeared. So that's the pair of galaxies, 4045, A, and 4045. We're off once again to Coma-Virgo, this time NGC 4048, galaxy, magnitude 13.6, kind of smallish, 0.6 by 0.5 arc minutes, but distant, 216 million light years. It's a spiral, but it just says it's an SP galaxy, so I'm not sure what that's referring to. However, in looking at the screen, there is a large number of faint fuzzies all over the screen. I suspect this one right here is the one that is 4048. 13.6. We're seeing the core plus a little of the extensions outside the core. As far as the sky is concerned, it's now sky dark is now advanced to sky dark. However, there is that atmospheric haze, but it probably isn't any worse than it was last night. Now, something to point out. This thing over here looks like it has a little fuzzy attribute to it, but I'm not going to assume that that's a galaxy. It could simply just be the way the light is being smeared by the atmospheric haze of a star. This is clearly a galaxy right here, and probably is NGC 4048. I'm thinking I'm going to wrap up at 4051 or whatever galaxy that is. So tomorrow night, if I get out again, I'll be able to start off with something memorable. But what we're seeing now is NGC 4049. It's a galaxy in Coma-Virgo, magnitude 13.3, 0.9 by 0.6 arc minutes. It's a spiral of the lowercase d type. I'm not sure what that is. I really do need to make a study of those sub-classifications. Irregular spirals and ellipticals, they're pretty clear to me. There's a difference between an uppercase and a lowercase c, for instance. A ring is an obvious thing. This particular galaxy is an S lowercase d, 37 million light years distant. And I can see it right about here. It's pretty diffuse. Diffuse galaxy. And it's hard to account for how diffuse it is. It could be a bit of an irregular galaxy in that way. Something that might bear some research. Moving on. Okay, what we're seeing right here is NGC 4053, galaxy in Coma-Virgo. And the reason why I'm landing on 4053 is the last couple were in either Corvus or Ursa Majoris. And I want to stick right now with the Coma-Virgo group, as well as maybe some galaxies in that region. This is a nice one to end on. It's a magnitude 14.6, 1.2 by 0.5 arc minute size galaxy. It's just classified as spiral, 322 million light years distant. And pretty much it. Look, we're actually seeing that it's an edge-on spiral. It's got extensions to the left and right, a brightish core. I'm impressed, but there are other faint fuzzies all around this area. One of these days I'm going to see about, let's see if we can get an ARP galaxy before we knock off tonight. A group of galaxies. I'll check the ARP catalog and see if I can find something in this region of the sky for us to go out on so we can get an idea of it. I haven't used the ARP catalog yet, so it should be an interesting experiment. But we will have another look at the sombrero before I knock off, just because I like to use it. And I saw some peculiarities about it last night. It seemed to have a bubble around it. I expect with the atmosphere of water we have, we're going to probably see a bubble around it again this evening. But it would be interesting. It could also have been an artifact of the handy cam I was using. Right now I am using the Canon PowerShot mounted up on the scope. Well, I just learned something very interesting. I was mistaken about ARP galaxies. Apparently ARP galaxies are extremely unusual or irregular kind of galaxies that fall outside the mainstream. Many of them are NGC galaxies. They're not groups of galaxies. I'll have to try experimenting with that at some point. But we do have an ARP galaxy forming on the screen. This is ARP 23. And it's probably right over in this location here. I'm actually seeing what could be two largish galaxies, and they may be ARPs primarily because they're gravitationally interacting with each other. There's also another faint fuzzy over here on this part of the screen, so I'll have to look into the ARP catalog a little bit. But at least we've had an experience. Now, one of the interesting things about using the Gemini 2 hand controller with ARP galaxies, you literally have to select ARP and then type in ARP and then provide the numbers. It's a little bit challenging. It's a numeric keypad with, like the old phones, with 3 letters associated with each number depending upon how long you press the button down for. So I'm going to go ahead and see if there isn't something that's galaxy groups in terms of this before I go off to the Sombrero Galaxy, Messier 104. I seem to remember Messier 61 giving a nice view. I'm going to allow it to form on the screen. 61 is quite beautiful. It looks like a wheel of 3 spokes. Bright central core, 3 spiral arms, equidistant from one another like a triangle. It'll be interesting to see what we see of it tonight. On good occasions, it is probably one of one of the most beautiful of the galaxy face-on galaxies that you'll see. I'm seeing the central core, and I'm seeing the wheel-like arrangement on the LCD screen. I'm not sure how it's going to turn up on the handheld camera, but let's give it a moment. Remember, it takes quite a while. I'll try to sit here still, and hopefully we'll get a decent view of it to compare with previous views in order to assay the seeing conditions tonight. And maybe, just maybe, it will give the kind of view that struck me from the first time I've imaged it. Messier 61, I'll give you some data on 61 as the image is compiled by the 6 passes at 4 seconds each. It's Messier 61 is a galaxy in Virgo, magnitude 9.6, largest 6.5 by 5.9, 60 million light years distant. If you multiply the 6.5 by the 5.9, I'm going to approximate it. That, of course, is the number 36. And if you took the log 2.5 of 36, you'd end up with something like 2. The value of log 36 would probably be somewhere around between 3 and 4. So if we assume it's 4, the average surface brightness of M61 is somewhere around 13.5 magnitude. So to see as much as we're seeing, the average light coming out of the galaxy, now the core is going to be brighter, it probably is going to be somewhere around magnitude 12. And the spiral extensions will probably be somewhere around magnitude 14.5. And if we get to see all of it, we've had a pretty decent view of Messier 61, Galaxy Virgo, magnitude 9.6, 6.5 by 5.9 arc minutes, 60 million light years distant. And now we're going to have a look at the sombrero. Let's watch as the image of the sombrero galaxy is compiled on the screen. Sombrero galaxy has about the same surface area, presented luminosity area. It's larger at about 8 arc minutes, but narrower at about 3. So it's up there close to 30. I'll give you the data on that and do a quick calculation of its average surface brightness too, and just mathematically winging it. Messier 104, it's in Virgo, southern Virgo, magnitude 8.0, 8.6 by 4.2. So it's basically the same thing, 36 arc minutes, round arc minutes in area, 50 million light years distant. Since it's at magnitude 8, however, and 36 when you take the log of 2.5 is roughly 4, its average surface brightness is probably it's 4 times as bright as Messier 61. 4 times as bright is roughly magnitude 2.5 to 3. So, yeah, we expect to see a more eye-popping view of something like the sombrero galaxy. And the view that I'm seeing, I'm going to shift it around because it's kind of drifted off into the lower contrast region. So let me do that. We can watch how long it takes to compile. Shouldn't take very long. There we go. That's a good place for it to be. Core was visible instantly, so it sucked that up pretty quickly. Now we're seeing the extensions. I'm seeing the dark bar to what we consider along the left-hand side of the galaxy. What I'm not seeing right now is the bubble, which could be a contrast artifact in the Handycam, but I can't be sure. However, the bubble may be present and I may not be able to see it until I actually see the galaxy on the screen. So, as the last several nights, Messier 104 is going to prove to be our Carpe Noctem view of the night sky. Fixing the camera in place on the Telescope has given consistent views of the screen. Unfortunately, it made it a little more difficult to put the galaxies and other faint fuzzies in the highest contrast region of the screen without having to manipulate it. And when you're operating at 256, it gets a little dicey because now it takes a while for the image to form, and sometimes navigation can send you off in the wrong direction. But those are simply challenges, and without challenges, we don't grow. So learning more and more about deep sky, about automation in terms of telescopy. I didn't start off with a go-to mount. I had to do it all manually. I am just amazed by the technological evolution. We didn't really have CCD imagers like this before the millennium. Everything was done at the eyepiece, although you could do photography if you were interested. And the technology for amateur astronomy these days is spectacular, and even with a telescope, a halfway decent telescope and a good night of seeing with an eyepiece, you can really toss yourself into the wonders of the cosmos. Carpe.